Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting over episode 5 of Mahou Shoujo Madoka Magica. If you would like to watch along, then start watching now. So it seems like we're getting a bit of a flashback here, showing how Sayaka eventually made her contract. Of course, at this point, we don't actually know what the wish is, I don't believe. We just know that Sayaka's doing it. Gotta say, the scene is pretty ominous, especially in regards to the color palette. So it seems like Hitomi is none the wiser of what happened, and Sayaka and Madoka are just sort of playing it off like they don't know precisely what happened. So of course, despite how happy Sayaka seems, there's a whole lot of tension in the classroom. At least between Madoka and Homura and everyone. So Sayaka's taking a really sort of lax approach to this, and I guess in a way it's not a bad thing to constantly think about how you could screw up and how close you were to screwing up. But at the same time, I don't think she's giving this the gravity that it deserves. So, knowing what I do know about this, that Sayaka is already sort of falling into that mindset about shoulda, woulda, coulda, that is not a good sign for things to come. I guess it's nice that at this point Sayaka's still, I guess, sort of dissuading Madoka from joining up if it's not something she really wants to do. So now it becomes fairly clear that Sayaka's wish was to fix his hand. And despite his hand being fixed in defiance of all medical science, he still has to stay in the hospital because for one reason or another he still can't quite walk properly. So I guess it strikes me as a bit strange. Like, Sayaka sort of went halfway with her wish. She might as well have just made him entirely better. Granted, the crippled left hand was the big sticking point for him. So, Kyosuke makes an interesting point about how he shouldn't have talked to her the way he did. But I think that whole sequence where he smashed the CD was a bit more important than perhaps Sayaka thinks it is. Especially in regards to her romantic prospects. Because I understand people snapping, but I don't know, the way he snapped at her seems like something a bit different than just being frustrated. So as it turns out, Sayaka's wish did indeed come true. He's able to play the violin probably as well as he ever could. You know, maybe a bit worse just for the lack of practice. Now, that Sayaka says there's no way I'll ever regret my wish, that really strikes me as needlessly tempting fate. And even at this point in the narrative, if you don't know what's going to happen, the fact that Mami died horrifically should already tell you that there's more going on under the surface than initially meets the eye. So, you know, tempting fate isn't a wise thing to do. So now we catch up with Kyoko, she was introduced at the end of last episode as a sort of invasive magical girl who's going to be taking over Mami's territory, had it not been for the intervention of Sayaka. So the plot thickens a bit more in that Kyubey doesn't really know what Homura's deal is. And she's sort of a rogue element in... well, in everything, I guess. So Homura and Madoka are having a little get-together here. Probably at Madoka's insistence. Notably, Madoka tries to spin Sayaka as being a better person despite how she presents herself to Homura. But Homura recognizes all of Sayaka's supposed good traits as things that'll likely get her killed. So now it becomes clear what's going on. Madoka's worried about Sayaka, so she wants Homura to sort of intervene and look after her, so she doesn't end up like Mami. I guess her idea is sort of sound, initially. Of course, Homura's a lot more pragmatic, so I guess she can't commit herself to something like this. So, Homer's making it very clear that the mistake Sayaka made by forming a contract is tantamount to death. So now Sayaka has to hold up her end of the contract. She's sort of in the unfortunate position of having to patrol alone. So the issue here is that Madoka feels guilty about not being able to do anything, so she wants to tag along. That is strictly a handicap for Sayaka, but I don't think Sayaka has the heart to tell her no. It almost feels like Sayaka's sort of falling into the same traps as Mami did the way she's talking now. So now Kyubei's getting a little creepy here, suggesting that it's good Madoka's around just so if things get hairy, she can form a contract. So things begin in earnest, although Kyubei points out that it's likely a familiar's labyrinth rather than a full-fledged witch. So what that essentially means is, even if they kill it, they get no benefit in the form of a grief seed. They just prevent other people from dying, which, while a noble cause in and of itself, it doesn't help them in their plight in any way. So before Sayaka can really do anything to the familiar, Kyoko intervenes. And so the two of them sort of showcase their differences in ideology. Sayaka is more concerned about protecting people, whereas Kyoko is more pragmatically concerned about farming grief seeds from witches. And therefore, if you kill the familiar before it becomes a witch, you essentially get nothing. So now that their two ideologies have come directly into conflict, the only real choice here is for them to actually come to blows and fight each other. It's pretty clear that Kyoko is a veteran magical girl, so to speak, so she's far more competent than Sayaka is. Of course, it's not like Sayaka can back down either, given her stubbornness. So I guess what would have been a simple encounter between the two of them has now escalated further. In part because of Sayaka's stubbornness. And we get that interesting little bit of dialogue from Kyubei saying that because Sayaka's wish was to heal someone else, she herself becomes tough and able to heal herself fast. I don't know if that's strictly true for reasons we'll find out later, but if nothing else, it's a little interesting tidbit. So once again, Kyubei decides that, hey, forming a contract is the only way to get them to stop fighting. The fight itself is interesting because it largely consists of Kyoko essentially beating the tar out of Sayaka, who is able to sort of heal herself and tank all the attacks. Of course, that doesn't stop Kyubei from taking the opportunity to try and convince Madoka to intervene. Fortunately for everyone, Homura decides to intervene before Madoka can make a contract. She just happens to show up at the right place at the right time to stop everything. Alright, that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.